In this video, we're going to have a look at the infamous Aylsham High SWAN paragraph. Now, you might call these paragraphs P paragraphs, PIL paragraphs, whatever you want to call them. In this video, I want to look at what it means to have a paragraph structure, how this one works, and how you might go about using it and adapting it to suit your own style of writing. Here are the ingredients for a SWAN paragraph. So SWAN stands for single word analysis, and the AN comes from the start of analysis. As English teachers, as we like a metaphor, you could also say that the SWAN paragraph is a relevant name because a swan, as you know, on the surface glides beautifully along the water, makes it look like it's easy, but underneath there's an awful lot of work going on. And in a SWAN paragraph, it is a dense paragraph, as in there's a lot in it and there's a lot you need to consider. But as long as you keep practicing and as long as you're aware of the things you need in there, you'll be fine. These paragraphs as well, you've been doing them since year 7, so you should be familiar with at least some of these aspects. And the more you practice, the better you'll be. So first of all, the first stage in anything you ever write is to answer the question in your initial sentence. So if you're asked the question, how does the writer present the weather in this extract, you would answer according to what you've read. So the writer presents the weather as stormy in this extract. If you were asked the question, how does the writer present the character of Piggy in this extract, you would answer, the writer presents the character of Piggy as kind, as helpful, and as slightly annoying. So you answer the question straight away. Very standard. First sentence should be you answering the question in your own words. The next part of the paragraph is to give your reason for why you've given that answer in the first sentence. Because it's not enough, is it, to answer a question and say, well, the writer says that presents Piggy as kind. Well, that's great, but it won't get you many marks because our job is to analyse the work of the writer. We have to analyse the language to show that we're experts. So you will then give your reason for saying why Piggy is kind. Now, here is where you can choose either a single word or you can use a technique. You don't have to always use a single word. You can also put a phrase in here. You can have a whole sentence if you like. But what you need to remember is you must, at this point, give your reason. So you've answered the question, and next you give your reason why you think that. The next stage in the paragraph, looking at the words that you've given, you need to explain the connotations or associations or symbolism of that word. So, for example, if I'd said, the writer presents Piggy as being kind, and then I'd given my reason. So the reason I think this is because he says gently to Ralph that they might consider calling the others. I would pick that word gently out and I would say the connotations of that word, if someone says something gently, it means they don't want to hurt someone's feelings. It means they're suggesting it rather than bossing them around. I would say gentle is associated with softness, with nice things. So that backs up my opinion that Piggy is kind because he's saying something gently. Okay, so that's the orange bit. You answer the question in a sentence. You give your reason. You choose your evidence, your word or your technique. And the yellow bit, you explain your connotations or your associations of that word. The blue bit now, you have to relate this back to the question. So just make sure you're continually reviewing what you're actually doing here. What language are you looking for and what question is it you're answering, and then link it back. It's worth doing that in the middle of your paragraph just to keep you on track, to be honest. And we'll have a look at an example of this in a minute. Now, these last few bits, these are the important parts that you need to show, particularly in your GCSE studies, that you've covered. So the top boxes there, the top 4 boxes, are all about your opinions and your interpretations. What you need to do to really hit the mark scheme as well is to explain the effect on the reader in general of that word used by the writer or that technique. So here's where you really need to show that you're fully aware that our job at the moment is to analyse the work of a writer. So you need to explain the effect of that writer's decision on the reader. So you might say at this point, and again there are examples coming up, but you might say at this point, the word gently helps the reader to understand that Piggy is obviously a very sensitive boy. He understands how to speak to people in a way that gets them to do things and not feel bad about it, and so on and so on. So you explain what the reader thinks as a result. Then, this one's really important. Consider the author's intentions. Now, an author, as we said in the other video, an author will have made a decision to use that word. And our job, your job, is to work out why they made that decision. So why would Golding have used that word gently to describe how Piggy speaks? Well, maybe Golding wanted us to understand that Piggy's not like a lot of the other boys on the island. He's not like Jack, that's for certain, because Jack's never described as saying anything gently. So perhaps Golding wanted to show us just how soft Piggy is and how vulnerable he is as well. You could go all kinds of directions with this. Now the final box as well, this is very important. If you can, this won't always be possible, but if you can, try and link this whole discussion of a choice of the writer, of the writer's decision. Try and link it to the context of the novel. So we know now a little bit about the context of Lord of the Flies. Try and link this idea of somebody speaking gently, giving instructions gently. Try and link that to the context of the novel. Sometimes it will be obvious, sometimes it won't. Okay, so now we'll have a look at an example of a quote and a question and see if we can put together a SWAN paragraph as an example for you to use. So here's our question, and it is, how does Golding present Jack? How does Golding present the character of Jack? And the quote we're using is this one from chapter 1, where it says, Jack vaulted onto the platform, his cloak flying. So my initial job is to look at that quote and pick out some words that really strike me as being important in helping me understand how Golding has presented Jack as a character, as a boy. So first of all, I'm going to look at that word vaulted. Now, when I think of vaulted, straight away I think of gymnastics, and I think of the vault when you jump over. The only picture I had was one on the, what are they called? The rings. But anyway, I think of a gymnast vaulting onto the platform. And I also think about this word flying. I think of material billowing in the wind. It's quite a dramatic entrance there from Jack, and I've got that image of him almost like a superhero leaping onto the platform, onto the rock. That's a very strong entrance for any character. So I'm thinking already to myself, why would Golding have, of all possible entrances for any character, if you imagine this happening on a stage in front of you, what sort of person would leap onto the stage, his cloak flying? What's Golding trying to suggest there? So now we've thought about that quote in depth. We've thought about what the words say to us, what images they put in our mind. And now we'll go back to the SWAN structure and see if we can start filling in those gaps. So we know that the first stage in our answer is to answer the question in a sentence. So the question was, how does Golding present Jack? Well, I've answered at the top. Golding presents Jack as a very confident and powerful character. That's my initial answer. That is my gut response. Golding presents Jack as a very confident and powerful character. So now I know the next stage in the grey box, I now need to explain why I think that. What are my reasons for thinking that Jack is very confident and powerful? So I'm going to give my evidence. And I've said this is indicated by the way he vaulted onto the platform with his cloak flying. So there's my evidence. There are my single words. And you'll see I've got two. It's fine to have two. You can have a whole sentence if you want, or you can have a technique. So Golding presents Jack as very confident and powerful character. This is indicated by the way he vaulted onto the platform with his cloak flying. Now, the yellow is where I explain my connotations, associations with those words, because it's not enough just to give my evidence. I need to explain that evidence. So I've said, the verb vaulted makes me think of a gymnast leaping across a piece of equipment as if it is nothing. And his flying cloak makes me think of some kind of superhero coming onto the scene with a dramatic flourish. The fact he's wearing a cloak also gives me the impression of power, as cloaks imply importance and status, being worn by certain parts of society or by graduates or lawyers in court. Now that's very specific to me, and this is how it should be. The connotations and impressions you get from a word will be unique to you. That's what I was saying in the other video, and that's fine. So, I've explained my opinion on Jack, I've given my evidence, and I've explained why that evidence leads me to that conclusion. Now I'm linking back to the question in the blue box. So Golding, therefore, makes the decision to present Jack as someone who clearly isn't afraid to make a big entrance, and who has a certain status among the boys and knows it. So what I've done there, I've gone back to my overall answer at the top, and I've just reiterated and added to it a little bit. Now, green is effect on the reader. As a reader, I am left asking, so that's my verb, I'm left asking whether or not Jack is going to be happy in a position where he's not in control, seeing as he seems to be so confident and self-important. I can also picture, that's my second verb, I can picture the look on his face very clearly when he isn't elected as leader. And I can imagine, that's my third verb, I can imagine his feelings of embarrassment at this point. So I've given three effects on the reader. I've given what I ask, what I picture, and what I imagine. Now I look at Golding's intention. Well, I think Golding may have wanted to indicate, that's my first verb, he may have wanted to indicate the potential for conflict in his depiction of Jack. Any group dynamic rests on the people in it being able to accommodate the views of others. By creating someone like Jack, who's clearly very forthright and outspoken, Golding is effectively throwing a potential hand grenade into the mix. How, we ask, is Jack going to cope in a group he doesn't control? So I've been quite free there with my thoughts and my feelings. I've used one verb for what I think Golding was planning on doing, and I think he wanted to indicate this potential for conflict. You don't put someone like Jack in a group of people unless you know that it's going to cause problems. So I think he did this. He's created this character to create this potential for conflict. And at the end, I'm linking to context now, so I'm trying my best to think, well, what's Golding seen in the world that's made him think I'm going to put someone like Jack into this novel? So I've said, in a situation such as this, where young boys are stranded on an island with no adults, Golding may have created a character like Jack to show what happens when you have individuals who want all the power but none of the responsibility. He may have been looking at leaders he had witnessed in the 20th century and making a comment through Jack on the nature of humanity and its endless thirst for being in charge. So again, that's completely unique to me. It's just what I think. But I would get credit for it because I've clearly tried to think about, well, what's Golding seen in his life, in his world, outside this novel that's made him think, I know who would be a great character to put in there. I'm going to make someone like Jack. So, have a read over that. Try and look back at the previous slides and see what I've done in each section. But hopefully you can see that really what we're looking for in these paragraphs, even if things are in a different order, it doesn't matter. What we want is a level of engagement with the question. We want to hear what you genuinely think about Jack. We want to hear what you think Golding has done, why Golding has done this, why he's created this character. So it might seem like a very structured response, but it's not really. It's actually freer than you think, and it's really just a case of expressing your opinions telling us what you think. So remember, you cannot be wrong in English. If you've given reasons or evidence, you cannot be wrong. Your main focus needs to be your own feelings on the matter. And there are some verbs below that are useful that you can use when talking about the effect on the reader and the writer's intention. And if you use a combination of each, you can layer up your answer. So before you know it, you'll have half a page. Modal verbs, remember those ones at the top of the board in each English classroom. They're also good to give shades of grey to your answer. So Golding could have meant to, the writer might have implied, or the reader may perhaps. So it doesn't have to be a definite all the time. You can give shades of grey. And here are some of the words that you can use, some of the verbs. So the reader pictures, the reader imagines, the reader is led to understand, the reader might question, the reader could realise, the reader may perhaps sympathise. All verbs that you could use for the reader. And then here's some verbs for the writer. The writer may have wanted to show. They might have been trying to explain. The writer maybe wanted to indicate. The writer may be suggesting. They might want to hint at. Or the writer could perhaps have wanted to emphasise. So hopefully that helps recap on the SWAN paragraph. It helps reassure you that it doesn't matter if you don't do it in a certain way. What matters is that you express in detail your own feelings on the question and that you've got evidence to back that up. Hopefully these verbs will help you to really add those layers of detail to your answer. Good luck. Thank you for watching.